Tell him what you said.
Mommy's a vampire.
That's why you holding the curtain open?
Yes. I'm scared of vampires.
Hey yo, Vamp Gang, Monster Squad, all my creatures of the night, open the door and invite me in. Popping out on TikTok with another one and all that, All my creatures of the night, holler at the moon when you hear me. A lot of people was flooding my inbox with the same questions that I would be gladly to ask and take a bow to. A lot of people keep asking me, hey, yo, Alucard, do you like humans? And I say, yo, I love humans. All y'all gotta do is invite me in. Another thing is like, hey, yo, bro, what's your age? How old are you? And I tell people, my age is beyond time. I'm a man that done wrote with some of the greatest poets of all time and space. But never mind that. All you gotta do is open the door and invite me in.
Jesus Christ.
Seems like everybody and their dang grandma is talking about vampirism and is concerned and all that stuff and everything. I'm going to throw nuance out there. I understand that it's risky on here, but someone has to speak nuance, bring a concept of balance to this, okay? So let's talk about it. Y'all need to understand that not every practitioner of vampirism is corrupt or bad, okay? I know a couple of psychic vampires out there who use this gift that they align to for healing purposes, to help other people, okay? To help others. That does not make them a corrupt or bad person because they practice vampirism, all right? There are ethical practitioners out there. Remember, light in the darkness, darkness in the light. Balance, y'all. Balance. The main ones that you need to worry about are your unethical practitioners who just do it for the sake of doing it because they think they can. All right? Main ones you want to avoid are what I call rage feeders. They literally have to provoke you to anger or to a heightened state of emotion just to be able to get in and take something from you now. Don't feed the trolls. Don't allow yourself to be provoked to anger. Maintain your grace and your dignity. Disengage and keep it moving, okay? Keep it moving. Now, keeping up with your everyday protections, prayers, anointings, whatever you do for protection will usually keep these kind of unethical practitioners of vampirism at bay. But if you happen to find yourself falling prey to these unethical practitioners, do keep in mind that energy at the end of the day is a two-way street. All right? As much as they try to take from you, you can recall your stuff back. You can take your stuff back. Okay? And if you decide to go the extra mile, you can end up pulling from them. Now, I don't recommend y'all doing that unless you know how to cleanse energy and transform it and all that stuff, because you can end up messing yourself up if you don't know what you're doing, okay? All in all, y'all need to understand that the practice of vampirism, anyone honestly can do. It's just a matter of, do you align with it or not? I sure as hell don't align with it, because if I try, my ancestors would have my ass. Trust me. That would be a disaster in a heartbeat. So y'all, please don't be so worried about this whole concept or thing or anything like that, alright? And do keep in mind, a person can only have so much sway over your energy as much as you allow them to. And another point, sometimes you're not under a psychic vampire attack. You are draining your own energy, okay?
All right, you guys, this is my New Orleans story time. So I went to New Orleans for my birthday a few years ago. My friends were supposed to fly in that day, but they ended up missing their flight. So I had a whole day to really just explore by myself. So I decided to do a few tours, and I ended up meeting a great group of people, but we ended up doing the one of the graveyard tours. And of course, on this tour, they talk a lot about Marie Laveau. So if you don't know who Marie Laveau is, she was a voodoo practitioner. She was an herbalist. Okay, she was big witch. Okay, they actually did a season of American Horror Stories that was talking about Marie Laveau. So while we were on this tour, they were talking about how a lot of people like to leave her offerings like bobby pins because she was a hairdresser and things like that. And I was like, oh, I don't have a bobby pin. But then I'm like, anyone that has crossed over, you can communicate with telepathically. So in my head, I'm just talking to Marie Laveau the whole time that we're on this tour and just kind of like showing gratitude to her, you know? And I kid you not, this was my first supernatural experience in New Orleans. Okay, so after that tour, I go back to my hotel room and I open my suitcase because I wanted to change my clothes. It was starting to get a little colder. I open my suitcase and there is a bobby pin sitting on top of all of my clothes. Obviously, I don't wear bobby pins. Okay, I have no use for them whatsoever, but it was sitting so perfectly on top of all of my stuff in my suitcase. And so I definitely took that as a sign like, oh my gosh, you heard me, you know? And she's like, hey, I'm recognizing you. I heard you. Here's the proof to let you know that I heard you, girl, okay? And that's just one story. So stay tuned for part 2 when I tell you guys about the vampires that were in New Orleans, okay? Because yeah, I got a story. All right, you guys, this is my part 2 to my New Orleans trip, and we're gonna talk about the vampires that I saw. So fast forward a bit into my trip, both of my friends got there and we decided to go out and walk Bourbon Street and just see what the nightlife was like. We ended up at this bar that had live music and it was a pretty big space. I don't remember what it was called, I wish I did. But when you walk in, there's like the bar on the side, and then this is what caught my eye at first. There was this table in the back right corner that a lot of people were sitting at, and they were sitting like on top of the table and on the actual like benches of the table. Their vibe was completely different than everyone else's in the room. It was just kind of, the only way that I can describe it, it was like a still darkness. It was just kind of off. But there were these 2 guys in particular that caught my attention. One was this tall black guy, right? That was sitting on one of the table, very tall. And this other guy who was like a shorter white guy, you know, but they both looked very interesting. But I turned back towards the bar so that I can grab my drink and talk to my friend that was next to me. Tell me how, as soon as I turned around with my drink, he was standing there right in front of me, like some Twilight shit. He started talking to my friend, asking where we're from, what we were doing. Now, one of my friend's boyfriends, who actually lives in New Orleans, was with us, by the way. But anyway, this vampire dude and his tall friend convinced my friends, not me, that we needed to go to this bar. I think it's one of the oldest bars that's in New Orleans. And they have this unlisted shot that you have to ask the bartender for that's not on the menu. And as we started walking, we noticed that we're getting further and further away from, you know, Touristville. And by this time, I really wish that I could explain it, but the vibes were just so weird. They were so weird. And I told my friends pretty much that it was a really creepy vibe. Like, why do we need to go all the way out somewhere else just for a shot, you know? And on top of that, their energy was just not normal. And my friend's boyfriend agreed with me. And I specifically remember like typing out a text on my phone. And as we were walking, I showed it to my friend's boyfriend. And I straight up said, I think they're vampires. And he just looked at me like with the most serious look, like, I don't know why he didn't say anything out loud. Like, I guess maybe he didn't want to seem like the crazy one. But this is where shit started to get real. So there has to be a part 3 to this because there's no way I'm going to be able to fit it. So I'm going to post it right after this one. Okay, this is the final part to my vampire story. So when he put me on that balcony, y'all, I was shook. Like, and I look over to the corner where my friends were, and none of them were like looking over. I was like, how are you guys not seeing this right now? So what I did was I kind of pushed my leg down so that I would have had at least most of my body like close to the floor. Like, that was the smoothest threat I had ever seen. But I did get down. I was definitely trying to play it off and keep things cool. But either way, shortly after that, we ended up leaving. And it's so crazy because even after all of that, he gave me his number. Like, I kid you not. And in my head, I was like, should I have a vampire friend? My sheer curiosity and just like, wow, like this is magical as fuck. But then I kind of got over it, you know, curiosity killed the cat. I don't need to be friends with a freaking vampire, and I deleted his number. But yes, you guys, so that happened.
With modern day technology, it is archaic to eat humans.
And the sun?
The sun is a nuisance to no vampires. It hasn't affected me in over 500 or 600 years. Survival in the daylight is possible with time and melanin. Only vampires with an ample supply can endure the light. It's like a superpower.
How come you ain't eat us?
Hello, TikTok. Fagger Freestyle here with another story time about the time I met a vampire. I tried to do this story the other day on live and it just did not work out. But anyway, I just decided to record a video. People have been asking me about the story, so here it goes. I'm a rideshare driver in New Orleans. So, of course, I encounter all types of people from all walks of life. So, one particular ride was very interesting. Now, this was a couple of years ago when this occurred. And I'm going to tell you, for the most part, I remember what she said. I do not remember what she looked like. And there are some details that when the experience was over, like I had completely forgotten some things. But anyway, so I'm riding, pick up this passenger, and I remember our conversation. And the craziest thing is I can remember her voice. I can, and even as I'm telling you this, I can hear her voice in my head. And I can even picture like this part of her face around her mouth, her lips. I can see them moving as she's talking to me. And I remember her hand being on my shoulder. And I remember what it felt like when she touched me. But a lot of other stuff, it's like was just completely erased. So I pick her up, and I do know that we were having conversation. I talked to many of my passengers, and she is telling me I have really great energy. So I told her thank you. You know, she asked me some things about myself, you know, nothing too private, nothing with too many details. So, you know, I just kind of gave her some general info. And I remember her telling me that she wasn't from here. That I do remember. And then she proceeds to tell me how much she loved New Orleans, how much she loved being there, living there, et cetera, et cetera. I do recall asking her where she was from originally, and all she told me was that she was from very far away. And it's funny again because I'm hearing her voice in my head as if this is weird. And I've never shared this story with anybody, so TikTok, you're getting it first. She touched my shoulder at one point. And this is where things got really strange. She touched my shoulder, and I felt like I just froze. And even as I'm talking to you right now, I can distinctly remember that feeling of feeling frozen. And my hands were on the wheel because I could see my hands on the wheel. The car wasn't moving. And being frozen in that moment, I hear her voice, but not like I'm here talking to you. In my head, I hear her voice telling me, don't be scared, that she's not going to harm me. And then after that, we're moving again. And I remember kind of turning and looking like that. And she was sitting back in the seat and her hands were on her lap. And I said, what did you do to me? And she just smiled. And she says, I just leached some of your energy. And I said, what? She said, I just leached some of your energy. She said, this is going to sound crazy, but I can assure you it's true. I'm a vampire. She said, but I'm not the type of vampire that you've been taught about in books and movies. She said, those types of vampires exist, but they're very rare these days. I'm a vampire that feeds off of energy. And all I have to do is touch you to get it. She said, New Orleans is a great place for her and her kind to exist. And that there are quite a few members of their tribe, is what she called them. I think I remember this part of our conversation so significantly because I believe when she touched me, she implanted something in my mind, whether you want to call it a memory or a thought or an idea. But she gave me something of herself, probably, to where I can recall this portion of the interaction between us. Maybe she knew that eventually I would share the story with others and therefore maybe make it a little bit more acceptable for them to start, for her and her members to start presenting themselves. I don't know. I don't know why she even chose me for this. But she told me that there are vampires that survive off of good energy. There are vampires that survive off of bad energy. There are vampires that survive off of sexual energy. And there are vampires that survive off of blood. And New Orleans is the only place in the world where you can find members of all four of those vampire tribes. Maybe she wanted me to remember this portion of it as a warning. I don't know. But I know she wasn't lying just because of how I felt. And even now, it's crazy because I still feel like her hand is on my shoulder, which makes me wonder, when she touched me, did she create some type of psychic connection between the two of us? I don't know, but I think I need to end this. Anyway, I don't remember where I dropped her off at. I don't even remember dropping her off. The next thing I remember doing clearly was being in a part of town that I didn't remember how I even got there. And it was like 2 hours later. And I was just in a parking lot. Just in a parking lot. And I know it sounds weird, y'all. I think I probably shouldn't even recorded this. I probably shouldn't even be talking. I probably should not even be talking about this. I shouldn't. Would you believe that this guy and this guy are the same person? If you live in New Orleans, maybe you've seen him around. Although if you have, I'd suggest that you probably run the other way. Either way, if you don't know who he is supposedly the vampire of New Orleans. Saint Germain was born sometime around the 16 or 1700s, but there are other reports of a man with these similar features dating all the way back to Christ. This man was a close acquaintance of figures such as Voltaire, Catherine the Great, Marie Antoinette, King Louis, Casanova, and so much more. There are some reports that even say that he was there when Jesus turned water to wine and was a part of the Council of Nicaea. There are reports of Saint Germain sightings all over Europe until 1784 when he died in Germany. But in 1793, he was seen in the crowd at the beheading of Marie Antoinette, which would have made him about 100 if that were true. But how did he get to New Orleans? In 1902, a man by the name of Jacques Saint Germain buys one of the most prestigious properties in New Orleans at the corner of Ursuline and Royale. It's said that he immigrated from France and was a descendant of Saint Germain. People who would party with him would often say they never saw him eat, only drink red glasses of wine. Jacques had been accused of attacking a young woman. The police gave him the courtesy of coming into the station the next day, but when he never showed, they decided to take a visit to his place. When they walked in, there was no Jacques. There was no furniture, no cups, no plates, no utensils, only wine glasses and remnants of something that appeared to be wine, until further testing determined that it was actually wine mixed with blood. In the 1970s, this man, Richard Chanfray, came forward as being the Count himself. He went on to tell a wild story that he was a vampire who had been living and just decided to roam and made his home in New Orleans. Although in 1983, Chanfray reportedly unalived himself in Saint-Tropez. Although if you're in New Orleans, there are sightings of a man named Jack likes to harass tourists from time to time and play tricks on them. And he kind of looks like Chanfray and Jacques and the Count. So if you're looking for your own interview with the vampire, you can call out for Jacques if you like. Meet him at the restaurant N7. Here they have a delicious plate of frog legs. Check the tag video for reference. Either way, this is a crazy story because this dude is really giving Lestat vibes. And Rice, what you know, girl? So you need some further details on those reports. Well, I got you. Saint Germain delighted himself in throwing elaborate and lavish parties for the socialites of New Orleans. His parties were highly anticipated due to the fine wine, food, and his elaborate storytelling. These stories were kind of all over the place, with tales from France, Italy, and even Egypt. Now, a lot of his guests did become confused because, while these stories were entertaining, the more well-versed guests did realize that a lot of the stuff that he was telling them took place hundreds of years earlier. Now, in a book by P. Manly Hall, Saint Germain is recorded as saying that he even possessed the staff that Moses used to bring water from a rock, and that it was given to him by the Babylonian king Cyrus the Great. Now, the Historic Association of New Orleans does have a Saint Germain on records as owning property in the 1730s. This man also happened to go by the name Louis. And there are no records of Saint Germain having owned the property on 1039 Royal Street. So maybe Lestat did find his Louis after all. And speaking of Lestat, remember the scene in the Interview with the Vampire series with Lestat and the opera singer? Well, Saint Germain was also a very accomplished musician.
And in the book called The History of Music by Charles Burney, who is the composer of God Save the King, he even says that on April 7th that Saint Germain was in attendance of private opera rehearsals for a prince that was making a first-time visit into London. He even says that the Count composed several new songs specifically for the prince, which led everybody to wonder, how did this mysterious man get such an opportunity? Now, that particular opera was performed for a very, very small crowd in the King's Theater, a private room. So it was kind of suspicious how later on that particular piece of work ended up being inscribed on the walls of someone's home. Now, regarding his name, no one really believed that his name was even Saint Germain, and supposedly the only person who knew his real name was King Louis XV, and this is because he was ordered to give it, and supposedly Germain only gave it to him in private. So the next vampire tale that I am about to give you is thought to be rare and one of a kind. It is featured in Virginia Hamilton's book, and the story is called Lana and the Catwoman. Now, the setting is the west bank of the Mississippi River, about 40 miles from New Orleans. The time period is not long after the Civil War, but before they began splitting up some of the sugar plantations. So let's get started. Now, Pretty Polly was set to marry young Samuel, who lived a ways up the road. But there was a girl named Lana, and she said that Samuel belonged to her. So she went to this conjure woman named Catwoman, and you needed to fear her because she had money to burn. She had power, and everyone knew about her. Like I said, everybody knew about her, and most stayed away because her life depended on something that all of us had, but only few of us would sell. So Lana got the word that Catwoman was willing to help her, but she needed to make payment first, and that payment required her, Lana, allowing Catwoman to suck her blood. Now, this Catwoman was of albino skin and was her vampire. She fooled Lana into thinking she needed her blood to make a powerful charm for Pretty Polly. "It won't be much, Lana girl," said Catwoman. So she forced her teeth into Lana's neck and sucked her fill. Afterwards, Lana went home dragging her legs as limp as a dish rag. And the Catwoman didn't even take any money. She told Lana to use it to go buy her some food and fill her belly. "When they lay away that Polly girl," murmured the Catwoman, because she would never speak loud, "you come back for that charm, and it'll bring Samuel closer to you than the sick puppy to a warm fire." Then the Catwoman laughed, and they say that the sound of her laughter came off a breath that had no life, only death and darkness. When Lana got home, she laid down and could hardly lift her head, but she was completely satisfied. Soon, Pretty Polly grew sick and tired and took to bed. The rumor was that Polly would never have old bones in her body. Samuel was frantic. He had everyone come look at Polly, but there was nothing they could do. And he just knew Lana put a spell on her. So Samuel found out where this Catwoman vampire lived and went to go see her himself. She opened the door right before he was about to knock. She was wearing a white turban and white dress. Her face was covered with rice powder to cover up the smell of the rotting flesh that was her face. She told him, "I know why you come here, but I want you to say it." So he told her, and she said, "My price for saving her is to suck your blood. Are you willing to pay that price?" He said, "You can get as much blood as you want from the slaughterhouse." She said, "I want strong and fresh young veins." So she led him to the couch, drank her fill, and told him, "Your girl will be fine by the time you get home. But just remember, I can spell her anytime I want, so you need to make sure you come back and give me more blood when I want." Go to part 2 for the rest.
Dude, I genuinely cannot tell what age you are. You look so young but old at the same time. There's actually a really good explanation for that. But you wouldn't believe me. But I'll try you. I'm gonna try you. You actually wouldn't be the first person I tried to tell. Okay, you ready? I'm a vampire. You see? You wanna swipe away right now because of what I just said. Why? Because you don't believe me. Because everything you know and has been told to you about vampires has led you to believe that vampires are fake. Fiction, right? Remember I said, you're not the first person I tried to tell, right? What if the reason why you all don't believe vampires exist is because every time a vampire like myself has said, I'm a vampire, you didn't believe them. And that's why you think it doesn't exist, because of your ignorance. You don't believe me, right? There you go. Like, you know, it's a vicious cycle. Like, I don't know how to get out of it. I've been trying to tell people about myself for about 152, 53 years. What if I told you I'm 362 years old? I've lived many of lives. I'm in my 11th life. What I mean by my 11th life is I've been known as many other names besides Damo. Who I am now is a man born in, what's my fake birthday? 1987. I was born in 1987. In 1987, I was doing coke lines off of Eddie Murphy's VIP table in Studio 54. Nefarious. The 80s were different, baby. The 80s were different. And you still don't believe me. No, I get it. I've been dealing with this for a very, very, very long time. All I could do is just give you information. Oh, for instance, the reason why I look young but old at the same time is because certain things age on vampires and certain things don't. Fun fact about vampires, we have the ability, as we consume blood, we have the ability to start reverting back to our younger selves. However, not everything reverts back to our younger selves, i.e. the patch that I have here. But my face is actually reverting back to a teenager's face. That's why I'm dealing with some acne right now. That certain side effects, you know, depends on the type of blood you drink. You know, I like O positive, but you know. Yeah, so hope that helps. It's time to go hunting soon. Getting kind of hungry. Oh, and we don't always have to drink the blood of humans, man. Like you know, I could go get a rabbit real quick, get a quick snack. Like, you know, this is probably another reason why we don't want to come out to y'all, because, you know, y'all would try to kill us. You know, you would fail. But, you know, you don't gotta worry about none of that, you know, cause we're pretty chill, as long as you chill. I need to stop smoking this shit here. Okay. I kind of feel like the more I show you, the more you guys won't believe me. But it's okay. I'm used to this now. Hi, Mama. That's me. This is me in 1919, I believe. I was trying to be an actor. I've always been trying to make my way into film, even 100 years ago. I kind of switched over to screenwriting, as some of you might know, just because it's a hard industry to crack, you know. Back then, they didn't really allow too many black people in silent films, you know, so you really had to be animated to kind of let them know what you're capable of, you know. I look back at this picture now and I hate it, you know, like I feel like I'm pandering to a certain demographic so that I can fulfill my dreams. Yeah, I hate it. But yeah, that's me. That's me. Let me explain something about fangs. This is the part of the video where everybody becomes a vampire expert, but those same people don't believe in vampires. Y'all humans are weird. Fangs are like your saliva. You don't salivate unless you smell food, you think about food, you about to eat some food. Fangs are the same way. Fangs are not meant to just pop out whenever. You know, this ain't True Blood. Like, stop with the movie shit. Stop with the movie shit, y'all. Don't stop thinking about all of that shit. When you force fangs out, it hurts, right? Because your body is not naturally opening up for the fangs to drop out. It's like if you guys were taking a shit or trying to take a shit and it's just not coming and you force that shit out, right? What happens after that? You guys will get hemorrhoids. Same thing. It's because your body wasn't naturally trying to push that shit out. Y'all need to drink more water, by the way. Drink more water. Mind your business, drink some water. It's like lifting something that is too heavy for y'all to lift. What's gonna happen? You guys will pull a muscle. You'll get a hernia. Same thing with fangs. Like right now, my gums hurt. And these are kind of pushing out a little too much. That my teeth aren't supposed to pop out like that. That's too far. That's too far. What's another thing y'all were talking about in the comments? Oh, sunlight. Vampires been here way longer than humans, okay? I don't know which one of y'all started that rumor, but that's a rumor. It was a rumor made to make y'all feel safe. Sunlight. Now I'm in it right now. We gotta go to the store just like y'all, like stores close at a certain time. I can't be waiting till nighttime to go shopping at the supermarket. You feel me? We just like y'all. We just, a little stronger. Drink blood. I like these questions though. Keep them coming. I like these questions. Oh, I'm like, you hear me slurring? I can't even talk right. My gums hurt. But keep these questions coming, just so you know, I might not make it through this series. I've been getting the true death threats. True death is the death of a vampire. I don't know why they call it that, because we're not dead. I'm not dead. I'm not dead. And that's another thing. Why y'all? Don't let Dracula fool you. Don't let Dracula fool you. Anyway. Okay.
What the fuck?
Caddy corner and that roundabout balcony right up the corner. The Carter brothers seemed like normal guys. In fact, they had a job at the Port of New Orleans, right down the street that they went to every day. But y'all, they held their victims hostage by restraining them to chairs. They would come home from work every day, slit their victims' wrists or re-slit them, drain the blood into cups and drink the blood. All documented, all fact. Every single thing about this story is a documented fact.
Do you know why New Orleans is known for vampires? A lot of folks know New Orleans for vampires because of Anne Rice's novel series, but there's more to it than that. Have you ever heard the story of the Casket Girls of New Orleans? The Casket Girls were some girls. They were ladies from elsewhere. The Casket Girls were a group of women who came over to New Orleans in 1728, and they did so at behest of the King of France to help boost the population of New Orleans. Now, New Orleans at that time was a budding colony, and there were lots of men there, but there weren't many women of good quality and high standards. So the casket girls were brought over on boat, and when they arrived, they filed out carrying caskets. Now, we think of this word, casket, but really it is the French word casket. Editor Avery here, I had to look it all up again just to make sure I got the words right. Casket means cap. It means cap because they wore caps, they covered their heads. And that's basically just luggage. So you could call them the luggage girls, but doesn't have quite the same spooky ring. The casket girls come over, and the first thing that the gentlemen of New Orleans say is, my gosh, they're so pale. And they were almost ashen, very pale of skin. They had very bright red, very pink lips. That was very strange. But they were women, and, you know, they hadn't been around many women in a while, so like, why judge? The casket girls were then brought into the Ursuline convent in New Orleans, and they were to stay there until their marriages could be arranged with several gentlemen in the area. One of the things of note about these women as they were in New Orleans at the convent was they rapidly blistered and burned in the sunshine, so much so that they stayed under the shade trees or kept all of their bodies covered just because the heat of subtropical New Orleans was just too much for their delicate, pale skin. As somebody who is delicate and pale, I can attest that you burn rapidly here, but that's besides the point. As these women were arranged into different marriages and sent off, usually the gentleman would find oddities with each of these casket women. And as they were around them more and more, they found that they were morose and unhappy. They just weren't quite right. Rumors started to spread that most of these women were off, odd, weird, something was wrong, and the men started speaking about it. Now, some of the women were turned out to fend for themselves, and this resulted in a really hard life for them. Some of them went back to the Ursuline convent. They didn't know really what to do with them. When the French king heard about how some of these women were being mistreated by their husbands, or turned out, as it were, he said enough was enough. He wanted them to come back home. So the Ursuline nuns decided to gather up the ladies, and their caskets, their luggage, had been stored at the top floor of the convent, on the 3rd floor. The windows and doors of this area of the convent had always been closed and shut. All of their belongings were inside of this basically attic-like space and sealed away until such time as they were ready to go back to France. When the ship had arrived to take the casket girls and their belongings home, the Ursuline nuns went up to the 3rd floor to collect all of their luggage and bibs and bobs to send home, and everything was gone. The caskets were empty. All of their belongings had vanished, and so did some of the casket girls too. And that's when the convent nuns decided maybe there was some merit to the rumor that some of these casket girls were vampires. And the rumor that these ladies were vampires spread throughout the French Quarter and New Orleans and right into history. Here's another little tidbit about the casket girls, though. Back in 1978, there were 2 paranormal investigators that had been previously kicked off of the convent property. And the Ursuline convent nuns were like, nah, get your happy ass over there and stay over there. Not here. None of that shit. So the 2 paranormal investigators camped on the sidewalk in front of the convent to try and track down if the casket girls were vampires and did they come in and out of the 3rd floor. They had their cameras targeted up there, and they, went about their evening. And as anybody knows, paranormal investigating is real boring until it's not. So these gents were sitting there having themselves a good chit chat and talking when the 3rd floor shutters on the windows began to open and close. Now, these 3rd floor shutters are interesting because they were nailed shut with blessed nails directly from the Pope himself. There shouldn't have been any spooky movement, and yet there was. The 2 gentlemen didn't notice until after the fact, which made it all the more delicious because they probably missed the very vampires who were opening and closing those doors, entering and exiting the 3rd floor of the Ursuline convent in the French Quarter. The next morning, the bodies of the investigators were found. They didn't survive whatever was happening behind them on the 3rd floor of the Ursuline convent, but their video recordings did. And those investigators' bodies were torn open like a delicious chicken, uncooked, on the sidewalk. And there was no blood. So was it vampires? But there's more to this story, because there always is. Here's the other side of it. Ready? So the casket girls are real. That happened. The King of France sent some women over to help bolster the community here. Make a family. And they did. What really happened was the ladies came off the boat and they did find marriages, and they were not too happy with the local gents because they would go out into the woods, they would go do work, and they wouldn't do things like homesteading. So helping maintain a garden or even like build a house and put a roof over it. These ladies ended up doing something called the Petticoat Rebellion in order to say, I ain't gonna put out if you don't put in towards the home. A lot of folks that can trace their lineage back to casket girls are actually quite proud of it, because not only were they upstanding ladies, good and wholesome, sent by the King of France, but they were badasses who were like, you do what you gotta do, sir, and then we can do what we gotta do. Got it? So that's the story of the casket girls. Fascinating, isn't it?
Louisiana, the Carter brothers. Back in the early 1930s, a young woman has just escaped out of a small window from the home of the Carter brothers in New Orleans. She was covered in slash marks all up and down her arm. When she finally manages to track down a police officer, she tells them that the brothers had been feeding on her blood. Police storm the residence and they find more women in similar states, the blood draining out of their body. The brothers, now thought to be real-life vampires, were captured and executed. And years later, as someone went to uncover their graves, the coffins were found to be empty.
Can't believe I never told you this story. While I was living in New Orleans, I turned down an offer to become a vampire princess. I was working for the Vampire Queen of New Orleans at the time, in both the vampire shop and the vampire speakeasy. And one of the doormen and his wife loved to go around and tell everybody who would listen that they were not only vampires and centuries of years old, but that they were vampire royalty. Every single day they're out there with the fangs, the contacts, the feather top hats, capes, the whole shebang, but like from Dollar Tree. So one day after my shift, I'm at a local bar picking up some food. It's like 4 a.m. and these two are sitting in the back of the bar. And the person I'm talking to kind of nudges me and is like, hey, do you know them? I look over and they like do the creepy come hither motion. And I was pretty drunk at that point and had a drink in my hand. So I was like, why not? Let's hear what they have to say. So I walk over and they proceed to explain again to me that they are vampire royalty, and they say that they know my secret. They tell me that they've been watching me for a while and they know that I'm secretly an energy vampire. And I was like, whoa, how could you tell? Then they say that they want to become my mentors and extend the opportunity for me to go to their house secretly without telling anybody where I am to complete the ritual so I can become a full vampire. And since they're royalty, I would be a vampire princess. If they weren't so hilariously awkward, it would have been like genuinely concerning. So they go in depth into this ritual of what it will take to make me a real vampire, as they're wearing like Walmart fangs, like, and I just nod and I'm like, oh wow, and listening, knowing full well that I will be texting our boss after this conversation. And then they tell me that the one vampire rule is that you are never allowed to tell your sire no. They picked the wrong one for that, because I say no even when I want to do things. But I just sat there and I was like, I am so honored that you would even consider me for an opportunity like this. I just know I can't rush into something this important, so I think I'm gonna need to take some time to really think about this and seriously consider your offer. And they were like, yeah, that's why we picked you. And I was like, uh-huh, as I'm texting the boss. Yeah, they were fired the next day. And I'm still not a vampire. It's tragic.
This may be proof that vampires exist. I was wandering New Orleans recently, and I heard whispers of someone named Count Saint Germain. Count Saint Germain first came into the public eye in the early 1700s. He was well recognized in the French court. Over the decades, he was seen in a lot of other European courts. He never seemed to age. Saint Germain is spotted multiple other times during the 1800s. Then a man named Major Fraser writes an entire book about his dad's encounter with Saint Germain. Same details about look and charisma and everything. Fast forward to the 1900s. There's another Saint Germain sighting, and this time people may be onto him because he disappears for 50 years. Then he is spotted again in the 1970s, and we're getting more to modern day here. Then in 2002, someone named Saint Germain, which I feel like is not a common name, y'all. Not a common name. So then apparently the Silicon Valley man disappears without a trace. Of course. But no one has seen Count Saint Germain since then. Have you seen this man?
We have managed to avoid Bourbon Street this whole trip because I've been on Bourbon Street before and it stinks, it smells, it's gross, it's crazy, and I have zero desire to be on Bourbon Street. But there is a vampire speakeasy haunted bar that I want to go to, and so it's at the end of Bourbon Street, so that's where we're going. We just hit Bourbon Street. This is why I wanted to avoid it. Look at how crazy this is. Yeah, this is not safe. Not to make sure. This is cool. So here's a cool secret. At the end of Bourbon Street, there's a bluesy bar called Fritzels. You go into Fritzels, it just looks like a regular bar where they play jazz. You go through these green doors, and there is a vampire-looking guy. He looks like an actual vampire. You give him a password, and he leads you up to a secret vampire speakeasy. So there's a bar, they sell absinthe, alcohol, the one that tastes like licorice, and then you're on top of, this is the patio outside of the speakeasy. It overlooks Bourbon Street. That's all Bourbon Street. That's all Bourbon Street right there. All the crazies are out.
He told the arresting officers, "Go right ahead and arrest me, because I am the king of vampires, and I have ruled for 4,000 years." In July of 2003, New Orleans hosted a Microsoft convention. One of the workers was a lighting designer named Shaw Thomas. When Shaw Thomas was finished with his Microsoft chores, he chose to go out to a local Gothic bar called The Dungeon, which is on Toulouse Street between Bourbon and Royal. Very cool bar. However, while he was there, he met a couple calling themselves Never and Worry. And they told Mr. Thomas that they were real-life vampires, and he was apparently tickled enough by that he invited them back to his hotel suite at the Marriott on Canal Street. When they got there, Never, the boyfriend vampire, picked up a champagne bottle, hit Mr. Thomas across the head. Now, head wounds tend to bleed more than other wounds do. So Worry, his girlfriend, took a Dixie cup, put it to that bleeding wound, filled it up, and then she and her boyfriend sat there drinking Mr. Thomas's blood. When they were done, Never rolled Mr. Thomas into the jacuzzi, and he never regained consciousness. After that, Never and Worry fled New Orleans, and they drove to Florida. When they got there, Worry, whose actual name is Carla Fry, went to a hospital emergency room claiming that she had been kidnapped and assaulted. Cops arrived. It took them about 5 minutes to get the real story out of her, and they said, "Look, if you tell us where your boyfriend is, your sentence will probably be reduced." Apparently there is no honor among some vampires. She told the cops everything that they wanted to know, and when they arrested her boyfriend, whose name is Chris Lane, He told the arresting officers, go right ahead and arrest me, because I am the king of vampires, and I have ruled for 4,000 years. Would you care to guess where the king of vampires was apprehended? Denny's. Vampires apparently dig the Grand Slam breakfast.
Get ready with me while I do a story time about how my friends and I met a vampire in New Orleans. So my friend and I, while we were on a girls' trip in New Orleans, wanted to go on a voodoo ghost tour of New Orleans. And so her and I went and got all checked in at the place we needed to go to. And our entry tickets gave us a free hurricane at the bar next door. So while we waited for the tour to start, we went to get our beverage. For some reason, I started getting into an argument with the bartender to the extent where we ended up missing the start of the tour. So when we got outside with our drinks, we were like, wait, what the hell? Where is everyone? And then some dude dressed in all black leather head to toe, a literal black leather trench coat, a top hat, wearing sunglasses. He was like, oh, I work here at the voodoo tour place. And he's like, I can take you. I know exactly where your group is going. And my friend and I were just like, okay. As he's guiding us, he's super kind and is telling us like all these fun facts and is like, oh, I also lead the vampire tours for this company. Me with my big ass mouth, I'm like, oh, vampire tours? Like people actually think that they're vampires? And he was like, he stopped dead in his tracks and goes, I am a vampire. And for some reason, I start to badger this man. I'm like, oh yeah? Vampires are real? Okay. Do you drink blood? He's like, yes, I drink blood. And I'm like, is that your only sustenance? Like, do you eat anything else? And he's just like, yes, we eat normal food, but we also drink blood. And we also derive energy from sexual encounters. I'm like, okay, what about going out in the daytime? Can you go out in the daytime or you can only come out at night? And he's like, that's why I wear these. And he's pointing out his sunglasses. And at this point, I should have been like, all right, let me just stop making fun of this guy. But no, I was like, I'm going in because ain't no way I'm believing that this person genuinely thinks that they get all of their energy source from blood and fucking. He continues on to tell us how he is an elder within the Vampire Society of New Orleans, and after about 15 minutes of this tomfoolery, we finally find our group that we're supposed to be with to begin with. And because I'm that annoying person in all tour guide groups, I make my way to the front to walk near the tour guide because I was like, I need to ask all these questions and tell her what the hell just happened. I was like, yeah, your coworker back there was convinced that, he's a vampire. She's like, oh yeah, that's Caleb. He's the best. And then goes into her bag and hands me a card. And then she says, this is the card to my website. I write literature on our species. Our voodoo tour guide with a vampire too.
I am of the, vampires aren't real. There's certainly not human beings drinking human blood in the French Quarter of New Orleans or any of that kind of stuff. So once again, I don't want to put you in a weird position. Feel free to pass up any question you want to pass up. But like, are vampires, as in at least 50% of what we see in the movies, is that actually happening?
I will say that it depends on your definition of vampire, though, because a lot of the supernatural stuff is like, stuff of myth and legend and stuff like that. Whereas there is a real vampire community and lifestyle. Sometimes on my tours, when I bring up vampire stuff, I'll point out, people think I'm kidding when I say there's a thriving vampire community here that's always on the lookout for new blood, but I mean that literally. They throw interesting parties around. I don't know if they still call it that. Every Halloween, they hosted the Bloodlust Ball of New Orleans inside this like abandoned like old Catholic church in the quarter. I've been to that party a few times over the years. Right. When you're out of the clubs, you don't want to take drugs that you haven't tested, you're not sure about. And in some clubs, you got to test your drugs, but in some clubs in New Orleans, you got to test the blood, I guess.
Right.
And different strokes, different folks,
Yeah.
So this is the thing.
Count me out.
Count me out. But you know what? To each their own. And if the community's thinking of ways to make people safe doing what they enjoy doing, I'm all about live your life.
Then okay, so you got the blood test. Correct. And he tested you, and what were the results?
The results were inconclusive.
And what does that mean?
Meaning that I have the same type of blood pathogen level, things like that. Everything just came out pretty much inconclusive. They weren't able to come up with any results.
Any results at all? Correct. Were they strange results?
Some things were, yes, higher glycemic levels, things like that.
And what about, you have no body fat?
Correct. If I were to place my hands on one of the electronic counters, it comes up as error every time.
Really?
Correct.
Wow, mine comes up as something else. Even when I was really, really skinny, I had a high body fat content. It was weird. I was like, your weight, and they said, you need to get in shape, which is weird. Anyway, tell us about these abilities. Okay, first let's do the strength ability. You're 125 pounds and you can bench press how much?
On a Smith Klein machine, I've been able to do 270, maximum 280. And with that right there, approximately 425.
So I've got 425 pounds over there.
Okay.
Oh, and I want to see you. What is it called? Bench pressing with the legs? I don't know what that's called.
It's called a leg press on a 45-degree angle.
Bench press with your legs. That's what I'm gonna call it. So let's go do that right now. Let's see if you can do that, because that's like pretty amazing. Come on over.
Take my coat off.
What was that breath? Was that getting ready for
just
something?
making bones. I feel like I'm getting old. Actually, I've got this thing behind me. I'm gonna have to pull it out.
The mic pack.
Yeah, mic pack. There we go. One.
Wow, you can go on forever, I'm sure. Okay, we got another test. I have one that I'm more interested in.
Okay.
It's the smell test. The smell test. Okay, come on over here. So you have a sensitive smell more than the average human, right?
Yes.
Put this on. Now I want you to guess what's on the plate just by smelling it. Let's start with plate number 1. Smell it.
Chocolate.
Yeah, it's chocolate. Wow, that's funny because I can't smell that at all. I really can't. I've got sense of smell. What's that one?
Blood. Steak.
Yeah! Wow! That was, isn't that funny at all that he said blood first? He said blood. I thought he was going to say...
Can you blame me?
Okay, and last but not least, I don't even know what that is. I think I know.
It's a fruit. Mango.
Close.
Close.
Well, is it a mango? Yes, it's a mango. Thank you very much.
We want to keep it as safe as possible, so we sterilize blades, sterilize the site of the wound, make sure we got bandages and all that stuff on standby. The donor makes the cut in any body part that they choose, and I take it. There is no mind while I'm feeding, just sensation and perception. I feel better. When I'm finished, I thank them and make sure that everything is medically taken care of, that it's bandaged. And it excites me, it arouses me, it makes me feel like everything is just perfect for a tiny little second.
Just had a blood burp, excuse me. It's burped. blood. Want to get creeped out? For those of you who don't know, I've been doing research on creepy folklore, creepy creatures, kind of from around the world. While doing this research, I came across real vampires. I read about a man named John Browning who was an American writer and scholar, and he actually researched real vampires for years. Now, no, these are not supernatural beings that can turn into bats and sparkle in the sunlight. I don't know how they feel about garlic. Was I disappointed about this? Not really sure. My favorite vampires are from What We Do in the Shadows. If you haven't seen it or watched it, you need to. It's hilarious. So John had been searching for real vampires for a very long time, and he finally found one in a clothing store in the French Quarter of New Orleans. A woman came into the store with 2 teenage boys, and the shop owner let John know that this was the person he was looking for. John decides to strike up a conversation with this lady and let her know that he is studying real vampires. During this conversation, she did smile, which revealed 2 teeth filed down to look like fangs. John did give her his number, but she never got back to him. Luckily, a few weeks later, he met some more real vampires in a nightclub in New Orleans. And a few weeks after that, he met what is called an elder vampire, and this was an older man who was a real living vampire. This gentleman invited John to NOVA meetings, and NOVA stands for New Orleans Vampire Association. This is where John started his 5-year study of real vampires, and I'm going to share some of that study with you. According to John's research, symptoms of vampirism start when the person reaches puberty. They call this your awakening or coming out of the coffin, which is hilarious because I'm a lesbian and I came out of the closet and they're coming out of the coffin. I think it's beautiful. Now, these are typically people who are feeling drained for no reason. It isn't an iron deficiency. It isn't a B12 deficiency. Something else is going on, and that's what finally might lead them to this conclusion. Now, depending on the type of vampire, they might discover that plasma or energy from another source is what gives them energy. The ones that need plasma are called sanguinarians, and they might discover this, for instance, by accidentally biting their lip and realizing that from that plasma, they are getting a burst of energy. These are people who really do feel like they need plasma to live. Although there are different covens of vampires, and a lot of them feel that it's taboo to drink plasma, and that is for reasons I'll get into in the next video. But then we have our energy vampires, and they feed on psychic energy from other humans. Again, if anyone's ever seen What We Do in the Shadows, Colin Robinson is an energy vampire, and he's so funny. But I've learned through my research that energy vampires aren't really actually these Colin Robinsons who just drain you of all of your energy just from talking to you because they're so boring. They actually might do this from an actual massage. Follow for part 2.
Vampires are real and they are millionaires. This man is injecting the blood of his teenage son into himself in order to reverse aging. What? His name is Brian Johnson. He's a tech millionaire. He's 45 years old and he spends up to $2 million a year in an attempt to stay young forever. Homie really said, I can outspend nature. Didn't really say that. I said that. He claims that his biological age is 36. On top of the whole blood thing, he's also a vegan and fasts for 16 to 18 hours a day. For reference, I can't do that. I also don't have $2 million. So my vampire era is just gonna have to wait, I guess.
So here's the full video. If you saw the story, you know, last night I saw something in the house that, as crazy as it sounds, to me looked like a vampire. I'm just gonna show you the video. Here we go. Okay, trying again. Hearing sounds up here, like somebody's moving around. This stuff's been happening, but as soon as I pull my phone out, everything stops. I don't know. I don't know. I swear I heard somebody up here. Holy shit, I don't know what happened. That thing vanished, and my camera stopped recording immediately at the same time. It's gone. Here's a slowed down version of what you saw, brightened and close up. I'm gonna post a still. I'm not sure how well you can see it. It turned like an old man to the door, lurched forward, and vanished. Honestly, at a loss for what to do from here, but I'll keep you guys updated.
Alright kids, let's talk about real vampires for a second. That's right, real vampires. We're people, just like you, just like everyone else. We're normal people, just with some abnormal traits and qualities. Like I said in my last video, we're not immortal. We aren't going to stalk and kill our prey in the middle of the night, biting, killing, and feeding. It's not how it works. Sorry, serial killer romanticizers. We are just beings that require energy from a third-party source to supplement our own for one reason or another. Of course, the real vampire subculture has several different camps that believe that the vampiric phenomenon happens for different reasons, but this is what I believe and what I live. We're everywhere, and you'll have to keep checking back for more videos to learn more about us.
Why doesn't Africa have vampires? Because they bless the rains down in Okay, so African vampires do exist, and they're called Obayifo. Not only does Africa have vampires, everywhere has vampires. Australia has the Aramayahu, Korea has the Kumiho. And while not technically vampires, even the Samoans have tales of magical bats like Leotogi. And while that's interesting, let's talk about something a little more terrifying. That's the Mayan god Comazat's bat death. He existed about 4,000 years ago in Mesoamerica. On the complete other side of the world, thousands of years before these two societies could ever possibly meet, was the Sumerian god Pazuzu. Wait, did I say god? I meant demon god. You know the vampires in the Witcher series? Yeah, not actually European mythology. Sumerian, based off Pazuzu. How did two cultures who had never met nor would ever meet come up with the exact same monster? Want to hear something else that's crazy? Pazuzu, in addition to being a bat god, protected women during childbirth. Remember the Samoan goddess Leotogi that I mentioned? Bat goddess and child protection. Probably just a coincidence. Have a magical day, everyone.
Hi, it's Bloody Mary in New Orleans. Take a walk with me down Rue Royale. Royal Street is known for its artistry and its antique shops. But it's also known for vampires. As we approach the vampire corner of St. Anne and Royal, this is a facade built in an empty lot from a building that fell down in 2014 to be used for the filming of the new series, Interview with the Vampire, right across the street from the Vampire Cafe and the Vampire Corner.
Hi everyone, happy Venus Day. As you can see, I am wearing green in honor to show my respect for Venus today. I wanted to come on here and clarify a little bit more about what a vampire truly is. So, back in the olden days, in mostly Eastern European countries, vampires were actually kind of heard of. They were not just mythological creatures, they most of the time were high priests that went through a very sacred, long process of a burial that would in turn transform them, their astral body, into a vampire. This is obviously not like anything that we've heard on TV or in movies, but in the traditional sense, this is what a vampire was. It is very rare that these traditions are still followed. You might possibly see them still followed in certain countries in Eastern Europe, like Romania. However, in the United States of America, it is very rare. People have had reports of encounters with real-life vampires that I've heard of. I've heard of maybe 2 or 3 encounters with real-life vampires in New Orleans. But the upkeep of keeping a high priest as a vampire is very complex. And back in the olden days, they actually stopped this practice due to the amount of energy it took to keep these vampires basically as a physical manifestation in our celestial level. There were many offerings and many requirements that needed to be given to these vampires back in the olden days when this practice was, I don't want to say fairly common, but was more heard of than it is now. And again, these practices and these rituals were really only done to high priests and very enlightened souls at the time. Also royalty. I mean, we can go back to Egyptian times and pre-historic findings. There were actual reports and evidence that when a king would die, that the disciples, I don't think disciples would be the right word, but his followers would actually commit suicide so they could serve the king in the afterlife. This is a practice that happened in Egypt, and these practices were done before history was written, before hieroglyphics. This is very ancient rituals in the days that they would consider Black Egypt, which is also where we get the word black magic from. And it had nothing to do with skin color. So anyways, if you guys want more information on vampires and the true origins and just how rare it is to see a vampire in Eastern Europe or the United States back in 2023, comment this video below. So in regards to my last video, there was also an anti-vampire ritual that people had to perform in order to stop feeding the vampire energy and stop maintaining the ritual, because it takes a lot of energy to keep somebody as a vampire. Now, when they did this, the vampire did kind of retaliate, so they would have to do anti-vampire rituals, which included putting a stake of wood into the vampire's heart. They have other anti-vampire rituals too that are just a little too disgusting for me to say on TikTok, but I will leave it up to your imagination. Now, we all have past lives. We all have, if you believe in reincarnation, of course, we come back. So there's also an old myth in Europe that if your child was born legs first, that it was going to be connected to a strigoi. I don't know how to say it. Whatever. It's a type of vampire that they talk about in Eastern Europe. So those children are believed to be reincarnates of a vampire in a past life. So they have to do another anti-vampire ritual to those children. The reason that vampires still exist to this day is because not everybody who was maintaining these vampires' energy did the anti-vampire ritual. So that's why we still do. You don't hear about them, but we still do have vampires here today, because not everybody did the ritual to properly kill them, I guess is what you could say about it. So these vampires, they still have energy and they can still come for us. Also, if you are an occultist, you may know how to bring back a vampire and feed them energy, continue the ritual that they were originally a part of, and give them eternal life force. Most of the time, this is because some occultists, alchemists want the vampire to do their bidding, but that goes into a much darker realm that we're not going to talk about today. Anyway, this is a very big topic, and I'm not going to get it done in like 6 minutes. So ask me questions if you have any, and let me know what you want to hear next.
Want to hear a story? This story is going to take us to Exeter, Rhode Island, and what is known as the Mercy Brown vampire incident. In the 1800s, tuberculosis was the leading cause of death in the United States. There were no real treatments for it, and it had an 80% fatality rate. Tuberculosis is a horrible disease. It is a wasting disease, and the sick literally get weak and frail, and by the end of it are skin and bones and coughing up blood, as if all of their life and health were slowly being sucked away. Kind of like the way a vampire drains the life from its victims. George Thomas Brown and his wife, Mary Eliza Brown, lived in a farm in town, and they had 6 children, 5 daughters and 1 son. Their third child was born on August 2nd of 1872, and her name was Mercy Lena Brown. History remembers her as Mercy Brown, but in life she was actually called Lena. An outbreak of TB hit New England hard in the late 1800s. And in 1882, Mary Eliza, Mercy's mom, fell ill. She was described as a very strong woman, and she fought the disease for over a year before she passed away on December 8th of 1883 when Mercy was only 11. Next spring, Mercy's 20-year-old sister, Mary Olive, who went by Olive, began to complain of nightmares and a crushing weight that sat on her chest while she slept that was draining the life from her. And Olive indeed wasted away, and she passed away on June 6th of 1884, less than a year after her mother. And Olive was a very loved young lady, and nearly the entire town attended her funeral, in their time not knowing that TB is contagious. So sickness continued to plague the town and the Brown family. A few years later, in 1889, Edwin, the only son of the family, also began to complain of nightmares and of terrible dreams of drowning and suffocation. He got no rest when he slept and was slowly becoming thin and pale. Edwin actually left the town for a time, going west to see if it would improve his health, and the air there did seem to help it for a time. While he was away, the disease's progress slowed down and he felt better. Edwin first left, Mercy was in good health. In 1891, when she was 19 years old, she began to show symptoms. She succumbed quickly to the disease. She passed away on January 17th of 1892 after battling it for only a few short months. After Mercy's death, Edwin returned to town, and his health plummeted. He started getting really high fevers that would cause him to hallucinate. He had nightmares, and he often called out strange things like, "She's here," and "She haunts me." And the townspeople began to whisper that perhaps there was a supernatural cause behind Edwin's sickness, citing an old folktale that said that if multiple members of the same family died of the wasting disease, it wasn't the sickness that was killing them. It was because one of their relatives had become undead, a vampire, and was preying on the remaining members of the family. And they said if this was the case, it would be really easy to prove because the vampire would still have blood in their bodies and live flesh on their bones. And if the vampire was found, it could save Edwin's life. All you had to do was dig him up. And on March 17th of 1892, that's just what happened. The bodies of Mercy, her sister, and her mother were all dug up from their graves, and their bodies examined by a Dr. Harold Metcalf of Wickford. Mary Eliza and Olive, the mom and the sister, they'd been buried almost a decade at this point, and they were found to have decayed at a normal rate. Mercy, however, was found in, quote, pristine condition. She showed no signs of decomposition, and some accounts say that when her chest was open, there was still fresh blood in her heart. And the townsfolk were shooketh. They were certain they'd found their vampire, so Mercy's heart was removed, and it was burned on a nearby rock. Then the ashes were mixed into a tonic and given to Edwin in hopes of curing him. But shocker, that didn't work. Edwin passed away 2 months later on May 2nd of 1892. It's likely that Mercy's body had not decomposed because she'd only been buried for 2 months, during the coldest months of the year, and her coffin had likely been kept in the cemetery crypt, waiting to be buried in the spring after the ground thawed. And the crypt acted like a kind of freezer, preserving her body. And just as the desecration of Mercy's grave and body did not save Edwin, it didn't save the rest of the Brown family either. By 1899, only George, the father, and one daughter remained, Hattie Brown, who did grow up to have children and get married and live a long life. Mercy and her mother and sister were all reburied, and their graves are located in the Chestnut Hill Cemetery behind the Baptist Church. Mercy's grave lays in the family plot, which is under a large tree, and people often come and leave little gifts and trinkets on her grave, which is so sweet. Some say that what happened to Mercy's grave and body caused her spirit to become restless. People have reported strange lights in the cemetery, and some residents claim to have seen her. In fact, local legend says that her spirit often visits members of the community before someone close passes away, and that the smell of roses is the first sign of her presence. Have you ever visited the grave of the vampire Mercy Brown? And did you leave her a little gift? Let me know.
Bro, I seen this story. I mean, maybe I should have saved it for Halloween, but it was about this dude, and they called him the Atlas Vampire. Bro, this is actual vampire shit,
Like Blade vampires or like Dracula vampires?
Like Dracula.
Oh, shit.
So basically, bro, yeah, it was in 1932, right? It was this girl named Elizabeth Strodenstam. And so, old girl she was I don't know if I can say the word, but she was
You can't, she was an exotic dancer.
She was an exotic dancer, there we go. I was gonna say a spicy dancer, but that's even better. She was an exotic dancer, right? At the time, she was coming home from work one night, right? Apparently, I guess she was walking home with one of her friends, and her homegirl was like, hey, are you sure you're gonna get home safe? She was like, yeah. So I guess the night that she said she was gonna get home cool, her friend never heard from her. So she was like, what the fuck?
It's always those times too, yeah, bro, I'm gonna be good, bro.
Yep.
And then boom, you're not
good.
It
happens.
You know what I mean?
Again.
Yeah.
So yeah, some homegirl never hears from her. So then she's like, what the fuck? Maybe she's sleeping or maybe whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't hear from her for a whole day. She's like, whatever, maybe she's just fucked up or I don't know. 3 days later, she eventually calls the cops and was like, can y'all go check her house? Because I went over there, knocked on the door, and nobody answered. When the cops got into her apartment, they found her on the floor, bro, in her living room, dead. And she had blunt force trauma to the head. And, bruh, all of the blood, damn near every drop in her body was sucked out of her, bro.
What the fuck?
You feel me? Old girl looked
out of her head? From
Nah, they said I don't know if it was from her head or somewhere, but they didn't really see where the entry was.
They didn't check the
none of her
for
blood
bite
was
marks?
in her body. No, they didn't say. They didn't really,
What
I don't know
the
about the
fuck?
autopsy or anything,
Yeah.
but they said that, bro, she looked shriveled.
What the fuck?
You know what I mean? Dude, yeah, bro, fucking crazy as fuck. And then the cops were just kind of what the fuck? That's hella weird. And then so they're just examining her body and everything, and then they find a weapon, and it was a ladle. And they're like, bro, what the fuck? And whatever, maybe he used something to suck her blood out. They were saying he was probably using that to drink her blood. That's what the cops were saying.
Out of a big ass punch bowl?
Yeah. So whatever he used to, suck her blood.
Because there's blood on the ladle or what?
Yeah, there was blood on it. Maybe he used it to hit her in the head, and that's what they were saying because it was metal. But there was blood in it. like in the, not
Yeah, on the part you used to scoop and shit, yeah.
So they're like, he probably was drinking her blood from there too.
What the
You feel me? And then so the cops, they started looking around, asking around.
What if vampires threw a fat ass party in her crib and she
didn't know they were vampires.
She was the drink.
Yeah, she was the drink. Like, she was just like, okay, so where's the drinks? They're all like, you.
She's like, what? Bow, get to it with a ladle.
But yeah, bro, that shit's fucking crazy. So basically, yeah, bro, the cops end up finding suspects and whatnot, and bro, they don't end up arresting anybody. Yeah,
the fucking vampire. You're never gonna find it. He's been alive for fucking thousands of years.
Exactly. So they never end up finding out who really does it. But but the last thing that they said was one person that was with.
Well, imagine as I'm pacing the pews in a church corridor, and I can't help but to hear. No, I can't help but to hear in exchanging words. What a beautiful wedding! What a beautiful wedding! Says a bridesmaid to a waiter. But what a shame!
I had a really, really strange experience back in October when I went to Boston and Salem just to basically go snooping around for Halloween. I needed to get some stuff. I knew something was gonna pop off because I'm in Salem, it's October, the veil is thin. I'm going there and I know it's gonna be some spooky shit. If you guys don't know, Salem is one of those places where you'll find practitioners who practice shit that like you won't find anywhere else. Like you'll probably find practitioners in Salem and in New Orleans that you'll find some magic that's like some deep underground stuff, like the stuff that I talk about. You won't find that anywhere else in the country. You won't find it in Sedona, like you just won't. You won't find it in California either. Well, unless you really know where to look for it. So we go to this place and I want to give you the backstory because a few nights, literally the Thursday night, I remember this, the Thursday night before we went, and we went on a Saturday or a Friday, I had a dream that was very real. I was very much awake in my dream, and I remember being chased down by this guy. And I know exactly what this guy looked like. It was a very weird dream, but I felt his presence in astral. And if you are an astral traveler, you know what I mean. So I was with this guy, this older dude, like this guy was like 40, 50 maybe, and he was totally hijacking my dream. And I was like, wait, like I've never seen this person. This is such a weird dream. Like I'm stuck in this amusement park type of thing. And by the way, guys, I've never been to Salem before and I didn't know what it looked like. Tell me how, when I got there on that Saturday, I walked into my dream, and this is not the first time this has happened, but my first question was, okay, why am I here? Like, and then we're walking around, we're waiting on lines. I had to go there because I had to get some offerings for Mercury and the moon spirits. And if you guys ever want to do that, Hex is amazing. Like, amazing. I love them in there. Did you know you can get the black pullet as a candle in Hex? I don't know how it works. I always thought you needed to use the cloths, but the woman there said you didn't need the cloths. Anyways, so I was online at Hex and I had to get a lot of stuff, guys. I gotta get pendulums, I had to get offerings for the planetary spirits, I had to get just a bunch of different things that I needed for around the house. So then next to Hex is this store called VAMPYR, and there was a guy that was standing outside of it, and I looked for a second, and then like spiritually, like me as a spirit, I felt like I recognized this person, and then it clicked that this was the guy that hijacked my dream. And like I'm not saying that this is conscious, like, you know, I would never blame anybody because people think that I hijack their dreams. I have a lot of clients that say that they see me in their dreams all the time. So none of this is conscious. Like, it's all energetic. This guy doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. Somehow our energies on the astral realm collided. And it's probably because I knew I was going to be there a few days after I had that dream. But it was weird. Like, my guides were like, you gotta be careful. And I'm always usually careful. Like, I'm always usually paranoid. I grew up in the city, so like I'm always paranoid. But I literally thought that what happened in this dream was going to happen in real life, that this guy was going to kidnap me or something and take me to this place again, and I was going to lose my ex-fiance, and all of that stuff was going to happen. So I literally told my ex, the guy I was with at the time, that I needed him to literally hold me like I was on a leash, because I was so scared that this old ass dude was going to kidnap me the same way he did in my dream. But it really got me thinking, because when I talk about vampire rituals to you guys, I'm talking about the traditional version of it. I'm talking about the old school stuff, the stuff that they did in ancient Egypt, the stuff that they do in Haiti, the stuff that they do with the Aztecs. I'm talking about that stuff. I'm talking about real ritualistic vampire stuff. But we often don't think that people can literally absorb our energy, steal our energy, travel through astral, wake up in their bodies, wake up their spirits and travel and suck energy out of people with fear. The same way that we get sleep paralysis, people that are very spiritually advanced, whether in a good or a bad way, can leave their body during sleep or during astral, or even during while they're awake. They don't consciously even know that they're doing it, and they can mess with us and they can take our energy. And God bless this man's soul. I'm sure he doesn't know who I am from a hole in the wall. Sadly, that is what this guy did. Now, he didn't get any of my energy, because I've learned throughout the years of having multiple sleep paralysis attacks, multiple attacks from many different entities that you guys don't even know exist. I know how to hold my own, guys. But there are real vampires out there that are not unalive and that are prowling the city streets just like that, and they will attack you in your sleep.
Did you know that an Egyptian goddess could be considered the first ever vampire? Her name was Sekhmet, and she was a warrior goddess who served Ra, god of the sun. One day, Ra sent Sekhmet to Earth to slaughter any mortals that may have been conspiring against him. But after Sekhmet got a taste of that sweet and savory blood of mankind, she couldn't get enough. The blood-crazed goddess began slaughtering the mortals indiscriminately, and before long, she had almost killed all the humans in Egypt. Ra sent out the monster, and so he took it upon himself to stop her, which he did in hilarious fashion by pouring red-colored alcohol into the Nile, so that when Sekhmet came upon the river, it had been dyed completely red, and she mistook it for blood and started chugging. The goddess ended up drinking so much that she actually passed out, and when she woke up, she had calmed down enough to return to Ra. It's because of this event that Sekhmet was associated with the consumption of human blood, and her worshippers dyed their alcohol red to honor her.
Have you ever heard of the Adze? The Adze is a vampire from West African folklore. They have a taste for the blood of the innocent. They are able to shift between human form and the form of a firefly. In firefly form, the Adze can travel through keyholes, cracks in walls, and under closed doors at night to feed on humans. In human form, they have the power to possess humans. My name is KRS McIntyre, and a number of creatures in my work in progress are inspired by African folklore. A Dance of Blood and Destiny is about an exiled princess trying to escape an arranged marriage and save a broken kingdom. You can check it out at the link in my bio. Thanks.
Are African vampires real? The Mpunjulu is a vampire creature from the mythology of the Zulu people of South Africa. It is said to be a bird that can transform into a beautiful woman. It feeds on the blood of children and animals.
So I was watching Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy and Angela Bassett, and he mentioned, obviously at the beginning of the movie, that his particular origin came out of Egypt, which got me thinking about the Egyptian vampire stories. So keep watching if you want to learn about that. So Egyptian mythology has two origins for vampires. The first is the soul of the Ka. Now, your Ka is an astral spirit that is born at the same time as you and walks alongside you on this earth. When you die, the Ka is said to continue on. The Ka will become bloodthirsty should you not leave it the proper offerings in your tomb. And one of the reasons that the Egyptians were said to have mummified their bodies instead was actually to prevent it from decomposing. It was believed that if your body decomposed, your Ka would perish forever. Version 2 of the story involves the goddess Sekhmet. Sekhmet, the devouring one, lady of the bloodbath, lady of transformation, mother of the dead, and of course the terrible one. According to the story, there was once upon a time in Egypt when people worshipped the kings and queens more than they did the gods. And naturally, this pissed the gods off. It was decided that Sekhmet needed to be sent down to kind of show them that they were wrong and that their worship was definitely misplaced. Sekhmet was also useful because whenever she unalived someone, she would also take their Ka and cause it to completely disappear forever. Now, as it goes, each night Sekhmet would descend from the heavens and drink blood and take your organs. Now, this was primarily done against men, where she would also take their hearts, but by morning she would descend back into the heavens. Now, if you're familiar with Anne Rice's work and Akasha from Queen of the Damned, you will also know that along with Akasha, Sekhmet became bloodthirsty, so much so that not even the gods could stop her. Night after night, she would feed, becoming blood drunk, and it took someone finally creating a type of potion that resembled blood in order to stop Sekhmet's blood madness. Now, in Vampire in Brooklyn, he says that he originated in Egypt, and when they came to destroy them, his species fled to the Carpathian Mountains and to the Caribbean as well. But the story of Sekhmet is nearly 4,000 years old, well before Bram Stoker or anyone decided to tackle the vampire origin story. So I thought that this was a great little tale to share with you guys so you know where the origins of some of these started. Have a great day and let me know what you think below.
The Adze is a vampiric spirit from the folklore of the Yu people of Ghana and Togo. It is believed to take the form of a bat during the night, but can shapeshift into human form during the day. The Adze is said to prey on humans by sucking their blood, often targeting young children or the elderly. It is associated with witchcraft and dark magic, with some legends claiming that the Adze is a witch who has acquired the ability to transform into a bat. In order to protect themselves from the Adze, people would often place iron objects such as machetes or horseshoes near their sleeping quarters, as iron is believed to ward off evil spirits. The Adze serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of the supernatural and the importance of vigilance against dark forces. This is Adze. The
original vampires didn't suck blood? The original vampires we know today began over 1,000 years ago in Eastern Europe, mainly Bulgaria. Back then, they were closer to phantoms or poltergeists that terrorized villages. In the 1600s, the Holy Roman Empire took over the Bulgarian people, and the legends of vampires went over to Western Europe, where they slowly transformed into the vampires we know today. And 100 years after that, vampires began rapidly appearing in fiction. The first ever work was a German poem called The Vampire in 1748. It's about a vampire whose love was rejected by a woman. He plans to visit her at night, kiss her, suck her blood, and convince her that life with him is better than life in the human world. Tales of vampires has always been tightly connected to romance. In The Eternal Trade, the main character is visited by a strange man at night. Before she knows it, she's tricked into an engagement with a vampire prince and is transported into his mysterious kingdom. If you're into fantasy, romance, and vampire lore, be sure to check out The Eternal Trade.